Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of Line Your Own Pockets. This is actually a fun one. We talked about this last week that we were gonna do behind the scenes, and I actually got excited because this actually came from just an offhanded comment in one of our podcasts at one point that someone reached out to Dave about after, and we said, oh, "Okay, this is definitely a whole topic. This is a whole rabbit hole we can go into." So we didn't want to do it offline. We wanted to turn on the cameras and the audio and do it with you guys. So take it away, Dave.
Yeah, so at one point, I don't even remember which episode. We'll go back and find it and link it to the show notes. We mentioned that moving your stop to break even is probably a mistake. We just sort of glossed over it. We just mentioned it very briefly.
Hmm.
So I got an email from Emmett H. He's on my mailing list. And he's like, wait, did I hear you correctly that you think moving your stop to break even is a mistake? So yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people that like their ears perked up a little bit when we said it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I
Well,
think it's mostly a mistake, but let's talk about it.
yeah, and let's firstly talk about why, right? Because I think that's the main thing where it seems like it's just one of those things that if you've ever taken a trading course or watched a video or talked to whatever, you hear the saying of, "Oh, well, you take off half to cover your risk, and then you move your stop to break even." It's just like saying eat your vegetables, like saying it's just this kind
Yeah.
of saying in trading, and that's why I think most people not only have heard about it, but maybe raised their ears just a little bit when we say it, because I think it's one of those just like so ingrained that, like a lot of things, you don't stop and actually sit back and think about and kind of ponder about to see if it's actually true. Because it's just you enter trading and someone says, "Oh, you buy the stock. If it goes up a bit, you take off and you move your stop to break even." Okay. And you just hear it so much that you think that that's what people do.
Yeah. You hear so many gurus say this, people who think they're smart, people that are, like I said, there's a lot of people that are good at talking about trading, but they're not good at trading. Like there's a
Hmm.
whole category of person like that. And they would line up right behind this statement of what you just said. I mean, and I love topics like this because there's such BS, and it
Yes.
doesn't take long to think about it and experience it and to understand what's actually going on to realize that it is BS. And the, it's a good example because uh, it, you reflexively sort of want to do it to make you feel comfortable when you're in a trade that could go either way, and
Yeah.
maybe you've got some, you're sitting on a profitable trade and you don't want it to turn into a loser. Just,
Hmm.
I mean, that's natural, but you're going to have to weather a lot of those trades to get the big winners. So it's sort of counterintuitive, and yeah, you're going to feel some pain sometimes, but yeah, you just need to think about it, do some back testing, and see uh, what actually happens when you do move your stop to break even.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. And let's take a second there about why I think people do it. And it's just that it's a pain avoidance mechanism, right? It hurts, and I think it hurts especially. And I think I've given this study a few times where, a well-known study where you give someone $20 and then you measure kind of how happy they are, and then you take the $20 back and they're worse off than when they started, even though financially they're net even. And I think that's what happens. You hear that saying all the time, is never let a winner turn into a loser, and things like this. And I think that's like the big kind of crux of it, is that people just hate the, oh, I was up a couple $100 or $1,000 or whatever it is, and then I lost money. Right, at some point, if I had hit the button, I would have put $1,000 in my pocket, but by the end of the day or the end of the week or whatever the trading was, I ended up taking a couple $100 hit. That, I think, hurts people more than if you just, you buy the stock and it just immediately drops and it's your stop loss, even though the dollar amount is the same. So I think all of this kind of move your stop to break even has just started from that very human but very incorrect thing that we do, where it's like, okay, I have the money. It's $1,000. I could buy something with that. That'd be great. And you want to just take that and move on. And you don't want to feel the pain of what happens when it kind of completely flops around the other way, which, like you mentioned, is going to be a lot. It's going to happen tons where you get a little bit of profit and then it kind of comes back against you.
Yeah, I mean, it's guaranteed to happen. And
Yes.
the good traders and good trading is being able to tolerate that. And that's what makes trading so hard. This is exactly why, because you're going to have to go through and experience the thrill of being in a great trade, it almost hitting your target by like 1 cent away, and then it comes back down and hits your stop.
God, I still hate it.
It's sure, it
Yeah.
absolutely sucks,
Yeah.
but you have to tolerate those things to have your strategy play out in the long run in an optimal way.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it sucks. Of course it does, but you have to be able to tolerate it.
And yeah, that's, when it comes down to it, right? That's what, if anything, if you ever come across anything in trading that is just said kind of broadly like that, that I think is the main kind of crux of it. Is it someone has done it to make themselves feel better, and then they felt better, and whether or not their P&L is then optimal at that point, it just became a thing, and then it kind of perpetuates from there. So let's take it back to kind of the quantitative side of things. So we know why people do it, right? It's to make their feelings feel better. But is there any way that someone could kind of legitimately test whether or not how much this is hurting them, and in a more back tested way? Because obviously you should be at the end of every day running your back test every day if you're a day trader, week or whatever, and like running your back test and saying these are the fills I should have gotten and this is what I actually got, and eventually hopefully the back test will say, oh, you should have made $1,000 today, and you ended up not making anything because you moved all your stops to break even. But on a more of a programmatic way, like how would you, because I was thinking of that myself, like how would you actually dive in to try to see how much, if any, damage is doing? Because I don't know, maybe we're wrong, maybe it is a great thing to do.
Yeah. Well, um, there are some back testers that make this easier than others. Uh, for example, Trade Ideas, you can't you can't actually do this. You have to do it outside of Trade Ideas because there's no mechanism for recording stuff post trade. But other backtesting softwares allow this. So the first thing I would do is um, figure out some column to add to your backtest that's going to be a post trade column. And we mentioned this, I think, in the previous podcast, where
Hmm.
there's basically two different types of columns you can add. One are pre-trade, and the other set is post-trade. Most people don't even think about the post-trade, and it's really, uh, sort of secondary. But that's exactly what you would do. Like, let's measure some behavior after the trade, and then add it as a column, and then at least be able to isolate that in your back test. So you can say, okay, here's the ones that did exhibit this behavior. Here's the ones that didn't exhibit this behavior,
Hmm.
and then compare. Um, so that's the first step. But I want you to think about what you're doing as you do this. Even just the very simplest rule you could add. I mean, move your stop to break even after a certain amount of time. All of a sudden, that you've made your strategy quite a bit more complicated, even with this
a,
one simple rule.
a lot, like twice as complicated at
Yeah.
least, right? It's a huge, because you're incorporating now, just because, especially, let's just talk about this in the realm of day trading to make it simple. Generally speaking, you've got some sort of stop loss and profit target, and then a kind of natural time stop. You want to be out by the end of the day. Now you're trying to tweak with like you're throwing in a whole other variable on top of what could just be a two variable system. A lot of people just use a stop loss and exit at the end of the day. Well, now you've done a whole nother variable that's only working intra trade. So yeah, the amount of complexity you've now added to your system is huge, and the
Yeah.
amount of testing and back testing, programming, and the time the back tester would take and everything. It's just, yeah, you're making your life real hard.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a huge point that most people don't consider. I mean, just because you can do something in a back test doesn't mean you should be doing that in your trading. So let's say just theoretically, you did find that there was some situation where moving your stop to break even made a lot of sense. It would have to be so much better than the baseline for one reason, and that is there's no order you can use, even at IB, who has tons of different order types, lots of different flexibility in the order types. There's none that does exactly this in a
Hmm.
way that's automated. So you're already going to be doing either a lot of programming on the client side to be able to make this work like you expect. And, that opens up a whole new level of risk with what you're doing. I mean, anytime you do write software, no matter how good you are, no matter how long you've been doing it, there's going to be bugs in there. There's going to be, and there's a risk of that. And
Yeah.
it's just, for that reason alone, it needs to be significantly better than the baseline of just being able to enter some orders that run, on IB servers or, in a standard automated fashion that implement your strategy. And you're right, this makes the complexity way, way more.
Yeah, and it could be a whole nother I think we say this every episode that it could be a whole nother podcast, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who search for performance at all costs. And I don't think that makes sense. You're looking for performance at a reasonable cost. If I said, "Hey Dave, listen, you could make an extra 2 grand a year, but you've got to sit at that desk the entire time, monitor you're not allowed to,
Yeah.
use the bathroom, you're not allowed to, you go, of course not. That's ridiculous, right? My time, my ability to walk away and have systems do things is definitely worth, money to me. But some people don't look at it like that. So they will try to make the most kind of convoluted and complicated systems that they possibly can to make the most amount of money possible. And on top of that, I think there's a certain, you're adding a big level of fragility. Say there was a magic order in IB that you could do that would do this. The more levels you put on top of a system, the more fragile you're making the overall system. Whereas now it's not just does the mechanic of the particular setup you're looking at, you have to monitor that for not breaking down. Now you have to monitor this other component of moving that stop. Because what if, someday your idea of, hey, I'm buying stocks that are oversold, and that continues to work, but it's just the moving stop to break even part of it that has busted the system, right? It's the level of complexity on top of everything that, yeah, even if someone gave me 2 back tests and one back test made an extra couple bucks a year, I'd still say it's just bad idea, right? Just
Yeah,
not
of
worth it.
course. I mean, yeah, even, anytime you have, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. If there's any sort of intervention you have to do manually, man, forget it. I'm not really interested, even if
Mhm.
I mean, it would have to be very, very significant. So, and I think that's the right way to do it. I don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to have complexity in the trade. I don't want to have to make decisions once I'm in the trade. And if you have to make a decision, then something's going to have to make that decision. And it's not going to be me. It needs to be my software or the logic in there. So that's why in
A-
almost every one of my systems, all the exit orders are entered right at the entry time.
And
No
that
deviation.
for anyone listening who hasn't reached that point, the stress reduction, the freedom, the just joy that comes from it, the as someone again who Dave is definitely further along in kind of the systematic, I guess, journey than I am. I'm newer to it, and that to me was always the biggest stressor of not just losers, but I'd say even more importantly, great winners. You'd have a great winner. You're like, okay, well, what do I do with it now? right? If I sell it now and it keeps going up,
Yeah.
and you're just the amount of work you're putting onto your brain for an unknowable answer is just crazy. So the moment you get to the point where, and I always say this, kind of the first step I would say of a lot of systematic trading is just that. When you enter the trade, you enter whatever your plan is to get out. I don't care if it's a moving average crossover or the migratory patterns of elephants or whatever the hell you decide. But as soon as the entire trade setup is done, the moment you enter, that's that is the smallest amount of work for the biggest leap in kind of mental clarity that you can possibly get at, because now you've gone from, okay, I need to find what stocks to buy or sell and then what to do when I'm in them, and you've cut that in half. It's just simply,
Yeah.
right, is this a trade to make or not? And yeah, so that, I just, when you said that, it just kind of, I don't know if PTSD or whatever you want to call it, but I remember the time where I'm like, I've entered the order, there's a stop loss, it's going to sell it at the end of the day, I'm done. And the amount of freedom and the amount of mental clarity that gave me was just, again, astronomical.
Yeah. It's any casual person that talks to me about trading and asks for advice. That's the very first thing I say, because that applies to no matter what kind of trading you're doing,
Hmm.
investing.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what kind of trading you're doing. That is a very good plan to follow. Like, have your plan for any eventuality when you enter the trade. I mean, no question. And
Hmm.
and you're right. That relieves, when people say, I get very often people will say, how do I get the emotions out of my trading? I get so emotional. It's precisely because you don't have those rules defined. You're in a trade and you're having to make decisions. You haven't gone through the process of making those decisions beforehand. And so that is stressful. That is emotional. That is
Hmm.
why you're feeling that, is because you haven't quite fully systematized what you're doing in such a way. And I don't that doesn't necessarily mean completely automated everything to a robot. It's just having a plan. You don't really have a full complete plan yet. It just comes down to that.
And even for the people, speaking to the people that are for some reason listen to us and they're discretionary traders and they're not interested in becoming systematic, the if you just think about it mentally, when are you going to make your best decisions? Is when there's nothing on the line, right? When you haven't yet entered a trade. There's no risk. There's no whatever. You're sitting in cash and you're looking to deploy that cash into the markets, and to bring it back to like moving the stop break even, by design, you are making that decision when there is something on the line. So you're choosing the most kind of heightened emotional and stressful state that you can ever possibly be in your trading career, and saying, this is the time that I'm going to trust my dumb lizard brain to make like the most concrete decision on whether or not this is actually a good idea, or whether or not I'm just, feeling a little fear or FOMO or whatever the emotion is, right? It's not going to work. It's you are at your most, you're at your dumbest moment when you're saying, I'm going to move my stop to break even. Like,
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, and uh, I've said this before. Humans are hardwired to do the least profitable thing when you're in a trade.
yep.
So you're totally right, and I mean that's sort of the whole reason for putting a lot of effort into having a plan to begin with, because you will do the wrong thing and it will be very frustrating. I mean, there will be
Hmm.
there's no question that will happen.
So now, so I think we've kind of debunked a lot of the reasons for it, but the main reason that people do this, right, is still looming out there, in which they are uncomfortable with the winner turning to a loser.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that you're probably going to say right off the bat, but that person who who feels that like really hard. And like say you had a client that came to you and that was their sticking point. And you hear it all the time, because I think this goes hand in hand with the guy who's like, I always take my profits too soon, right? I got out at 10, it went to 12, it would have been a way bigger trade, maybe double or triple or quadruple the profits, but I saw the money and I took it. With those two things hand in hand, again, what do you tell that guy that it's going to happen? So how do you
Yeah.
deal with it?
So the reason you're doing it is because you want to feel like you are correct. People want to be right. You don't want to have made a decision and it turned out to be wrong. I remember when I first started trading, a lot of people would say, well, just go back to every losing trade you have and figure out the reason why it was a loser, right? And then you could just like
Yeah.
get better and better.
Yeah.
Like that makes no sense. But there was a while where that's what I was trying to do because, some people that I thought were smart were saying that. And the same sort of people are saying move your stop to break even. But you're really doing it because you want to feel right. And when you move, so think about what happens when you move your stop to break even. You really probably would like to move it to break even plus 1 cent, because that would make it technically a winner for the purposes of your performance. Your win rate is going to be higher because of that. So you're gonna feel a little bit better. But it's not the right thing to do. And I remember when I first started backtesting, and when you first start backtesting, you realize, man, this is a freaking superpower. It's just like the antidote to all the BS I see out there. I could just go test everything. And because you hear this so often, I remember thinking, well, surely there's some combination of moving your stop to break even that works. So I'm going to try it. So I went through, all sorts of different combinations, thinking, well, I must not have it right because I know this works because people are telling me it does. So let me wait a little bit longer. Let me, make sure the stock goes far enough in my direction first and then move it to break even. Maybe, wait, do that, but wait a little bit longer before I move it to break even. None of that stuff made the strategy any better, because you will have stocks that come down to break even, but don't hit your stop and then continue in your direction. I mean, and the other important thing to think about is after you start trading a system like this, it's pain avoidance. So you see the things that when you have a losing trade, man, that's painful. So your tendency is to go look and try to eliminate some of those. So this is the kind of the first thing you do, but that's not what's going to make a big difference in your strategy. You're not going to have a path to confidence where you can 10x the amount of capital you're putting toward a strategy by getting rid of some of the losers like this. You're just picking at the edges here. That's not what makes your strategy successful, is getting rid of the losers. What gets your strategy successful is what you do during the big winning trades. Look at those. Focus on those. Don't focus on your losers. That's where the biggest bang for the buck is going to be when you're just starting to trade a strategy like this.
Well, yeah, and that goes down to, I always look at extremes, because I think that helps find kind of the middle ground. Is that, if you had a strategy that was right 99% of the time, say 99% of the time that didn't happen, where the great winner turned into a loser. It still happens, right? It still happens 1% of the time. So I think focusing on that and saying, okay, so it will happen. It's an absolute certainty that, say I'm just using an end of day stop. The stock goes down all day long and I'm short and it's amazing. And then in the last 10 minutes, some amazing news comes out and it just rips, and then it comes all the way out and hits my stop. It's like it's going to happen at some point. It's just, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So, I think the answer always ends up being is kind of looking at everything in aggregate, is like taking a step back. If you're noticing this happen on a singular trade every now and then, and that's really getting to you, what I've kind of recommended when I've done a little bit myself is trade more, right? If you have 20 trades going on at one single time, then you're going to notice that one trade move a little bit less. And then maybe if it's like, if this thing's really killing you, and maybe you're a little bit too big, but you just have to get it in your head that, your profit target is your profit target. And hopefully it's your target, whether it's a time stop or an actual physical profit target. Hopefully it's like that for a reason. And you've spent some time, really considering it and working it through and understanding that. And you have to understand that if you had a reason to do it, then you should make sure that you stick to it. And then, like we say with everything, is you got to make sure that you track, because eventually the numbers will show that taking those profits early or moving that stop to break even or whatever it is, at some point you will see, a detrimental effect, even if it's only one trade. Like, I'm thinking of my trading. I had one completely standout trade that made, like my last month, just the stock just ripped, went up like 1,000% in a single day. It's just nuts trade. And if you had taken profits too early on that because you were up a little bit, that the back test and then your actual results look so dramatically different that should be kind of a big kind of shakeup. That if that's only going to happen once every 2 years or 5 years, it still hurt, right? It was still a good idea to do. So, yeah, data is everything. And then, if it's getting you too much, just more trades and smaller is probably a good way to do it.
Yeah, I like that. More trades is generally better. It just reduces the importance of any one trade. So,
Hmm.
you can overwhelm a big losing trade with a whole bunch of winning trades. And yeah, I love that approach. Um, I mean, the other thing to think about is if you're optimizing for a system, you've got a good strategy. What's most likely going to end up in there are trades that for stocks that are moving a lot, right? They're exhibiting unusual behavior. So it's not going to be that unusual for it to move quite a bit during the
Hmm.
trade. So it is, I mean, if you're trading the right things in your strategy, it very often it's going to come back to your stop and sometimes stop out. So it's an important thing to think about. It's not, your trade very rarely, a good trade is very rarely going to just go straight up right in your direction. The easiest trade you've ever made goes right up to your target and you get out, right? It's a lot of trades look scary when you look at them, and they feel scary because they're moving a lot. You got potentially a lot of size on, but those are typically the ones where you make a lot of money. So you have to be able to stomach that.
Well, and I don't know if this is a brilliant idea I just had or a dumb one, but it does go to what we talked about before, where you don't really want to look at your P&L. And
Yeah.
at the very least, you won't see it in the moment. And it might be easier to then, because I think that's what really gets people is that for me personally, and I know some people don't recommend this at all, but I've got contingencies in place. Once the day has started and I've realized that the system is working, I see the orders getting placed and the stop loss getting placed, I I close it down and I go do other stuff. I work on other things. So I'm not looking at it constantly. We've talked about not having your P&L staring you in the face all the time,
Yeah.
because that's just going to encourage you to do dumb stuff. If you look over at one moment and you're up, 10 grand, and then you look over the next moment, you're down, that's causing a lot of this kind of dopamine fluctuation that you just really doesn't benefit you at all in your life, because as we talked about, you really shouldn't be making those decisions at the time. So I know it's funny because the people who get involved in trading are usually the really good workers. I think that's one, the people who have, I guess, gotten to this point, they're listening to two nerds talk about systematic trading. You want to be there and you want to watch the thing and you want to do as much of that as possible. And like we've mentioned before, your work shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be staring at your P&L tick up and down throughout the day. It should be building new systems and running other tests and doing all this kind of stuff. So I think a lot of this gets solved by just not watching. Just go
Yeah.
go go for a bike ride if you're Dave. Go for a lift something at the gym if you're me. Just
Yeah.
go away. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And That's a good litmus test for me. Like if I know I'm trading too big if I don't feel like I can go for a bike ride or go run an errand and have my system continue to take trades. That's a warning sign. I mean, it's
Yeah,
as soon as you
lack of
introduce,
faith in your lack of faith in the because you're to the point where you're not making any decisions during the individual trade. So if you can't walk away at that point, it means you're either not confident in your system or you're not confident like technically. Like you're worried that like the actual hardware of the computers or the program you're using or something like that is going to end up failing on you, right? It's definitely a lack of confidence if you can't just get up and go enjoy your life and you need to
sure,
sit there the whole time and watch.
yeah, and even if even when you introduce a single rule that happens rarely that you have to be there, then all that's out the window, right? The whole
Hmm.
plan, it's like the whole plan is kind of out the window. If you have to be there to watch it, so that's what I think about a lot. And um, you said something a second ago about you don't think there's a lot of discretionary traders that listen to the podcast and are interested in this. I'm not so sure because I think a lot of people are automation curious. A lot of
Yeah.
discretionary traders are automation curious, and
Hmm.
as we've talked about before, there's so many ways you can make a tiny step in the direction of automation that will improve your discretionary trading immensely.
Hmm.
So you don't have to go all the way to full automation to get a lot of benefit from the stuff we talk about. And I mean, I see that very often with traders that contact me, traders on my mailing list. Yeah, I know that a lot of discretionary traders are interested in this topic, but because as we've talked about before, ultimately it is kind of the same thing. Something's making a decision to
Hmm.
make trades, whether it's a piece of software making it for you or not. It's that you have to have some sort of system.
Well, and that I always talk about that with people who are interested is that this is a good kind of slippery slope where you start the journey tomorrow, right? I could get someone, I could sit down with them for 10 minutes and the next day they're trading. If they're zero, if they're doing everything themselves right now, I could get them to you know say 20% systematized in like one day. And that's, simple things like alerts and setting orders and all that kind of stuff that
Yeah,
we talk about. And then if you can just get them there, then I think that's when everything else follows because they end up going, oh, okay, well, that made my life a whole lot easier and only took a little bit
yeah,
of work. And then that's the gateway drug. And then you're kind of you're
yeah,
pulling them down after that. And you're saying, yeah, it just gets, the further you go, it just gets better. It's get better and better the further you go. So yeah, there could be, and that would be a great, comment below if you're someone who is still currently hitting all the buttons and coming up with all the ideas yourself and doing all that. Let us know why, if you're listening, and why you're listening, and welcome, and hopefully, I feel like in like someone on a mission when I'm talking about this, but like hopefully we'll convince you at some point if you keep listening.
yeah. So there's one more thing that has just come to my mind as we were talking about this, and so we'll step back to the back testing piece.
Hmm.
There is one order type that you could use to that is more common that could be a proxy for this kind of behavior and to test this. And that's a trailing stop. Because that's essentially what you're doing when you're moving your stop to break even.
Yep.
It's kind of a trailing stop in a way. So a simple way to backtest it would be try a trailing stop. It's like probably pretty like really much looser than your initial stop
Hmm.
that works in conjunction. And that would be a quicker way to backtest it using sort of a standard order type that you could implement that in a lot of trading systems. So, and you might think, well, it's not quite, that's not going to be quite good enough for what I want to test. That's okay because it's going to be a decent enough proxy. If you can't get a trailing stop to improve your system in any way, which I'm willing to bet it's going to be really hard to do,
Hmm.
then you're not going to find some iteration that's going to be significantly better than that. So that's a good simple place to start. And I always like, let's distill something to the simplest possible thing first to try
Yeah.
before we create this whole rabbit hole for yourself that's going to require a lot of resources to get just right. A lot of bugs could happen from that. So that's a
Well,
good place to start.
I know trailing stops are very uncommon, and I haven't found anything from an intraday point of view that was ever beneficial by a trailing stop. But for just to tell Dave, because he just never knows that there's a whole. I told him that the market was down. He was like, "What?" There's a whole nother world out there, and for people who are longer term swing traders or investors, it's actually very common. You know, if you think back to the original turtle traders, trading and doing very well trading futures, that was essentially their style. Is right, you would buy a breakout of some period of new highs, and then you wouldn't sell until some breakdown of new lows. So that is kind of in its simplest form a way to trail a stop. Their idea is as long as it continues to go up, if I don't have that kind of arbitrary end of day exit, well, I might as well just hold it as long as it keeps going, and again use that kind of stop. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Again, not something huge from the day trading side of things, but I know swing traders kind of use that all the time because part of the main power of swing trading is that ability to periodically catch something that's just goes insane, and you're in
Yeah.
it for a long period of time. So in that case, yeah, it definitely used a fair amount, and people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly the longer your holding period, yeah, the more a trailing stop might make sense. But
And
yeah,
you're
I
right,
agree. Intraday, it's going to be hard to find something good. I can go ahead and tell you, it's going to be hard to find something that works.
yeah, I will. I'm sure someone has. I haven't. Right, for me, it's always been stop loss, profit target, get out at the end of the day is usually the best because your time frame is so limited, and there's so much jittery noise intraday that you end up usually just getting clunked out. But I do like the concept of boiling it down. That is at its simplest form what we're doing here, right? Is if you're trying to move your stop to break even, well, you don't have to think of it as an all or none system. You could move it kind of slowly and incrementally over time. And again, that's just a trailing stop, which you can do traditionally. I know there's some tests that you can run. Like what if it breaks a moving average or something like that, which might be a little bit more refined. But yeah, depending on your time frame, it's definitely something that maybe you want to take a look at.
Yeah, and the other thing you could do is delay the trailing stop for some period or only put it into play when it reaches a certain level of profit or something like that.
Hmm.
So that would be like a step two for testing this thing, uh, or testing the proxy of the move stop
Yeah.
to break even.
Well, thankfully, it sounds like we have fully debunked another one. I like these. I like
I
so
do too.
if you guys have any other I don't know old trading adages or things that you've just kind of been told and never really sat back to think really hard about, then let us know because I love going in and just doing it because like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, it's just something you hear. There's no way that you've gotten into the trading world and read books and talked to people and done whatever and heard this. And I don't, some of it for sure might be malicious, but I think it might be just one of those things where enough people have heard it and then maybe they've gone on to trade successfully themselves and just never thought about it. So they don't even realize they're doing something that's probably wildly suboptimal. Uh, just because it's like, hey, I came into the game 20 years ago and someone told me to do this and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah.
So it's got to be the only way to do it. And just,
Well, it
you
sounds
know,
smart to new traders. It sounds so smart, right? This is like a great compromise. You can
hmm.
just can move your stop to break even. I love it. You're playing with house money, right? It's
Oh,
it's natural to
yeah.
think that way, and I think that's why people keep saying it because it sounds so smart to new traders.
Hmm. Well, and there's a lot of things like that. Like one of my favorite, I know this won't affect Dave. But one of my favorite things in trading is that bears sound smart and bulls make money, and it's just it comes from the people who will, every day you turn on the media and they bring on someone who talks about how awful the world is and everything's going to go to zero tomorrow and sell everything now, and then you get another guy go on and go, markets go up 70% of the time. You should probably just own something. Owning assets is probably a good thing. And it's like no one will ever listen to that guy, even though it's just logical sense, because
Yeah.
it's not interesting. And it's the same with this saying, hey, you should put out your stop loss, you should put out your profit target, you should probably go to the beach or you should probably go for a walk or get some exercise. And it's like that's not good and that won't carry because it's just not it doesn't sound as smart, it doesn't sound as interesting as anything like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've covered this topic pretty well.
Good.
Yeah, I
I'm
appreciate
wondering,
Emmett for bringing
yeah,
this up to answer the question.
I'm wondering if people are going to agree with us or if there's going to be any pushback. So I'll be reading the comments thoroughly because I could see a world where there's someone that we have tried to just shatter their like flat earth reality, like with the they're not coming for your stop thing, and they just won't believe us, and they're gonna come back. So again, let us know if you think we're a little bit off on this one, but I had a lot of fun with this one, and as always, I'm Michael Noss.
And I'm Dave Mabe. We'll talk to you next week on Line Your Own Pockets.